Shwedagon Pagoda in Rangoon. It's a very famous pagoda, one of the two largest and most important in Buddhism. These are some buildings and Suli Pagoda in the center of town, not nearly as big but older than Shwedagon Pagoda, I'm told. It has a scaffolding around it as it was getting a new coat of gold, and this large white monument is the Independence Monument. Burma got independent from England, from Britain in January of 1948.
Was Rangoon your port of entry into Burma?
Yes, and here are some more scenes of Shwedagon. There's about an eighth of a mile around the base of it, and a lot of stupas and smaller pagodas that people come to. This is a Hindu festival of some sort that I was taken to. I was visiting in Rangoon with my wife, came down from Tangi, and one of the Fulbrighters stationed there in Rangoon said, "Hey, Jack, do you want to come and photograph the firewalkers?" And so I naturally said yes, and I was taken to this place where, in Rangoon, where these men were walking on a pit of hot coals. You could roast an ox over that pit. And it was that hot, and I was not very far from it. They had a kind of a fence around it and allowed anyone who wanted to with a camera to come in and take pictures while this was going on. Some of the people going across carried children with them, and some of them were quite young. And they also were sticking things that looked like knitting needles through their cheeks and tongues, and carrying objects around supported by needles stuck in their flesh. I was told it was some kind of Hindu festival. I may at the time have been told much more than that, but that's all I can remember now.
Do you recall the significance of the marigolds that are worn?
No, I don't.
Here's an instance where a person is carrying a child across it.
Yeah. And this again is Suli Pagoda. It's quite impressive, really. It's the highest structure in Rangoon. It's built on a hill, but still it's very high. During the Christmas holidays, when Mrs. Shantz and I came down from Tangi and stayed with another Fulbrighter in Rangoon, we were taken to a Thai cultural performance, a commission from Thailand composed of dancers and thespians of one sort and another, performed in the auditorium. Was an outdoor auditorium for the I would say a good many of the people there were members of the foreign embassies in Rangoon. It was very impressive. It was held at night, and consequently the color film didn't show up very well because there wasn't quite enough light. But it was a cultural festival put on by the Thai government in recognition of the friendship between Thailand and Burma. And there were many Burmese dignitaries as well as all of the staffs of the foreign embassies located in Rangoon at that time. Some of these dancers were performing monkey dances, I was told, and another was a bird dance, and accompanied by music. We came down to Rangoon about 4 times during the course of the year we were there, and each time we had some business to conduct in connection with my work teaching in Tangi, about 300 miles north of Rangoon by air. Sometimes it was to buy supplies, sometimes it was to make reports to the USEFB, that's the United States Educational Foundation headquarters in Rangoon, and sometimes it was to fill out papers, but the Christmas holidays was simply a holiday per se. There were about a dozen American families in Burma that year, and more than half of them were located in Rangoon, so we had places to stay while we came down. As you can see, black and white shows up a lot better, being a little faster film. There's no light other than the stage lights there. Burma has only 3 large cities of 100,000 or more. One of them is Rangoon, and the other 2 are Moulmein and Mandalay. I never got to Moulmein, but I did get to Mandalay, as you'll see in some later film. The rainy season lasts from the 1st of June until about the end of October, sometimes into November, and this was in December. Here's Government High School in Taungji, where I worked, and that Volkswagen there is the transportation I had while I was there. It's a 2-story wooden building with no electricity or running water. The privies are located just behind where I'm taking these pictures from. And these gentlemen are officials of the United States Educational Foundation in Burma, and the 2 men in the front are my superiors there. One of them is the headmaster of Government High School, and the other is the chief education officer of the Shan States. And the Western man in the white suit was Tony Pia, who was one of the staffers of the American embassy there. These hills are the crags behind Taungji, the hill for which Taungji is named. Tong is in Burmese hill, and Ji is big, so Taungji is big hill. And that's a little pagoda on the top of it. These scenes are taken from my garden. The house is behind me and the garden is in front. And as you can see, the house is up on the hill above the town. And the town is up on an escarpment above the valley below, where Inle Lake is located. We had quite a nice view and quite a nice house. There was another Fulbright couple living upstairs. Every 5 days there is a bazaar or a market in these towns in the hills of the Shan States. And this is the bazaar at Taungji. It doesn't have anything to do with the week. It's just every 5th day. And it's a time when all of the hill tribes from the surrounding area bring their produce in, fruits and vegetables, as well as handicrafts that they've made, like baskets or clay pots. And it's a day when everybody does their shopping, because very few people have any kind of refrigeration. So they buy their meats and vegetables and eggs and things like that every 5th day, as our cook, Joseph, did. And we always had fish for supper on Bazaar Day because we knew it was fresh. The people that you see with the black costumes on are members of the local hill tribe called Tong Thu, or Pao, P-A-O. I've heard both names applied to them. They are the hill tribes who live in and around Taungji. And there are many other kinds of people in these scenes, some of them Hindu, some Muslim from India, some Shan, some Burmese, some Mon, and Karens as well. But the local hill tribe, most of the farmers then are are these Tong Thu people. There was an American couple lived about 12 miles out of Tongji. The Hackett's, Bill and Marion Hackett, they were Baptist missionaries to these Tong Thu people. And Dr. Hackett he wrote his doctoral dissertation on the Tong Thu. I think it's probably available someplace in the library. But they wear, the women at least, wear black predominantly, and they wrap their heads with Turkish towels. I bought one in a bazaar later on during my year there and noticed that it was made in England. But they're very colorful.
Is it the case that the women are predominantly market women and men the agriculturalists?
Yes. The women apparently do the business, at least the market business, the bazaar business. Very few men are engaged in selling. And I noticed this was true all over the Shan states at bazaar time. The men do some shopping, as this fellow is buying some bananas there. But the women are the sellers, the stall keepers, so to speak. And that's even true of some of the permanent shops around that area. But these, on Bazaar Day, the marketplace is, people come in just like in the United States at a farm market. They set up their temporary stalls just for that one day. And they bring their produce in these bullock carts. And I took these scenes on the road just in front of our garden. And it's early in the morning. The sun is to my back, and they're coming in with cartloads of produce to sell at the bazaar. I noticed things like peanuts, which they call ground nuts, and all manner of fruit. Citrus grows there in the Shan states. Strawberries. We had some of the best strawberries I've ever eaten all winter long. By winter, I mean from the dry season, about November on through March. With these color shots, you get a chance to see that even the Tong Thu ladies like to add color to their costume by wearing colorful headdresses. Most everybody has something on their head, at least and they don't have any pockets in those skirts, so they all carry these Shan bags. And I brought several of those Shan bags home with me. There you see some onions and some leafy lettuce. This chap is dressed up in a clown costume, and he's doing a sword dance, not a very good one, but he's just practicing before a procession that he's going to lead at Government High School. Every time there is a religious festival or holiday, they have some kind of parade or procession. And I'm not sure what the significance is of his uniform, but he's practicing his sword dance as he will perform it. But this particular festival was held at the end of Buddhist Lent, called the Festival of Light, and it occurs sometime in October or early November, depending upon the phases of the moon. And one of the things that they do in Tongji is they all march down to the center of town and send up paper mache balloons that they have made by hand, and they use hot air to provide the lift. And this is a group of students from Government High School carrying gifts to the Ponjis, the Buddhist monks. And they all go to the monastery first and give gifts to the monks, and then they go to the center of town, to the marketplace, and send up these balloons, as you'll see. And it's sunny in the dry season, so a lot of the people use umbrellas to keep the hot sun off. There you can see one of the balloons wrapped up there.
What's the significance of the gentleman on the right here bearing the two flags, the red one and the blue one?
I don't know. I don't really know. But there you see the balloon in the shape of I think that's in the shape of a fish. But some of the animals were quite elaborate. That is, some of the balloons in the shape of animals were very elaborate. Cows and elephants and pigs and turtles. And here's a purple cow. They launched it off pretty good, but it, as you'll see, got hung up on a wire and burned up right there. The little blonde boy in the foreground was Wallace Roby, the other Fulbrighter's son, about 4 years old. There aren't very many blondes in Burma. These fellows are young boys who are in the monastery for a period of time during their early life. Some of them stay, but most of them leave after a while. That lady's carrying a week's supply of rice, probably. Here's another balloon that never made it. They were successful with some, however. But everybody comes down and has a good time. They cheer when the balloons burn up on the wires. This one, I believe, was in the shape of a fish, and they got it off fairly well. They seem to have a kind of a contest, different groups, and you can see people celebrating there.
What is it that allows it to burn for any period of time? What keeps the flame going?
It's oil soaked in cloth and wrapped around a wire support that keeps the fire burning and therefore keeps the air inside the balloon heated. This was the great success of the day, really. It was a papier-mâché balloon made in the form of an elephant, as you can see, quite an elaborate thing. And after a lot of careful work at the beginning, they got her off, and it sailed clear out of sight, much to the joy and celebration of the people on the ground, especially the ones who set it up. I think they were members of the Tangi Rotarians. There you can see they're all happy, celebrating the successful launch of their balloon. There's one in the form of a turtle. And another purple patchwork cow that never made it. Apparently the cow shape wasn't too aerodynamic. Tangi, being situated where it was frequently a place where visitors to Burma came. By visitors, I mean official visitors like Khrushchev and Bulganin, and U Nu, the premier, came up to Tangi. It's the elevation is just under a mile, and so it's nice and cool there in the hot season. And these people are all lined up waiting for the arrival of the premier at that time, U Nu, who was coming up for a 2-week holiday, as I remember, between the visits that he made to the United States in 1955 and to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics at a later time. And they paid a return visit while I was there in Tangi. And U Nu came. We were advised the night before by loudspeakers on trucks to turn out in the morning at dawn and greet the premier. And so by we, I mean everybody in town. And so everybody in town did turn out. Some groups together. These boys in the white straw hats are some of my students from Kambaza College. That's their uniform. They wear blue blazers, and gray trousers, white shirts, and white straw hats. some of the Indian Sikh population there. That's the flag of the Union of Burma at that time. I understand it's different now. There's the headmaster of Government High School, U Tsun Han, who was also the science master. And I taught some of his classes while I was there. These two ladies, dressed in classic Burmese fashion, are they're holding those flowers, bouquets, waiting to present them to the premier upon his arrival. They're very patient in Burma. That whole crowd waited around without too much fuss for a couple of hours. The planes don't fly at night in Burma, so the airport is some 22 miles away. So when the premier's plane landed, he was still pretty close to an hour away by motorcade. But he finally did arrive, and he came in the Home Secretary's Pontiac station wagon. One of the ways to rest is to squat in Burma, and people get accustomed to doing that, and I did too. I can't do it anymore, but I did it then. That's a little kind of welcome arch that they constructed for the premier's visit. And here comes his motorcade from Heiho Airport, about 22 miles away, and he's in that green Pontiac station wagon with the Home Secretary. He steps there and receives the flowers, and then he gives the flowers away, and he walks up the street to the applause and cheers of the people along the way. Here are some Kachin ladies, wives of some of the soldiers who are stationed there at Tanji, in their tribal costumes, lots of silver bangles around their waist and breast.
Just in Tanji alone, what ethnic groups could you identify, or were you familiar with at that time?
Well, there were red Karens and black Karens, and this little group here is the European contingent. My wife and Mrs. Roby and her children, and Mrs. Ockenden, the wife of the British headmaster of Kambaza College, and their children. And these are Boy Scouts dressed up in their Boy Scout uniforms, and they came down in a group to visit the premier. And when he left, 2 weeks later, I went over to the airport in his motorcade and was allowed to step out on the tarmac there. I say tarmac, there wasn't any pavement at all, but the Union of Burma Airways, which was the only airways in Burma, flew these DC-3s, or Dakotas as they were called, exclusively. I rode up and down from Tanji to Rangoon many times in those old birds.
Was Onu a Shan, or what was his background?
No, Unu's a Burman. At the end of the school term, the first school term in December, the Kambaza College had a picnic, and these are the student. That was Ralph Ockenden in the front there, the headmaster, a British national. This is the student body, so to speak, of Kambaza College, including the teachers, heading up to the Craigs, to the top of the big hill above Tanji, for an all-day picnic to celebrate the end of the school term. As you can see, there are girls and boys as well. These are the older boys, and as soon as they spied me, they began hamming it up for the camera. They're carrying baskets of food, rice and chicken curry and so on. They're good fellows. I enjoyed working with them for that year. That's Mrs. Shantz cheering them on. When they got to the top, they formed a big circle after they took their shoes off and went over to the pagoda and said a few prayers. Then they formed a circle and passed two stones around, and The fellow in the middle was playing his harmonica, and whenever he stopped, whoever had the stone had to get in the middle of the circle and perform. It was kind of a game. Some of the boys did what they call cockfighting, C-O-C-K, cockfighting, where, as you can see, they hopped around on one foot holding the other and tried to knock each other off balance. And they had a good time with this.
Is actual cockfighting a fixture of the local cultural scene there?
No, I never saw it at all. I don't know really how they got this name. Some of them are quite good athletes, and Kembaza College had a very respectable soccer team. They called it football, but it was soccer. Mr. Roby and I tried to teach them how to play softball, and they took to that pretty well after they learned not to stop the liners with their feet. This is a canal from one of the villages on the Inle Lake. Inle Lake's famous for its leg rowers, and you can see this chap propelling this long dugout with a paddle and his leg wrapped around it. And as I recall, those people who did this were brought up from Burma back in the old days by the Burmese king from Lower Burma and settled here. And they liked it around the lake, so they developed this form of propulsion. It's unique to this area, so I'm told. They are a group called the Intha, I-N-T-H-A.
Inle Lake, by the way, is the lake below Tonji, correct?
Yes, it's about 22 miles long and from 4 to 6 miles wide. It's not very deep, but it's in a valley between two ridges, and it is a rather famous place because of the leg rowers, and it's a place where they bring all the dignitaries who do come to Burma, and it's about, I would say, 20 miles from Tonji by road. And one of the reasons we went there at this particular time, and these are scenes of that, is it's a kind of a religious festival where the images of the Buddha, there are 5 of them, are carried from one village to another on boats. You can see the boat that's going to carry them there has those white umbrellas, which is a symbol of either royalty or something sacred in Burma. And the people all dress up in their best and come in boats, and they accompany this smaller boat that carries the sacred images of the Buddha, from one monastery in one village to another monastery and then another village. There are about 6 villages around Inle Lake. The biggest one is at the north end of the lake. It's called Yang Shui, and it is at Yang Shui that we are going to be headed after the images are loaded onto this little boat. They're carried out to deeper water and put on a great huge barge in the shape of the barge is in the shape of a bird, like a duck, classical duck. And then they're towed, that barge with these images are towed up to Yangshui, the big town on Inle Lake. And they're carried then to a monastery, and here are some of the men who are going to tow that barge. As you can see, some of these dugouts that they propel by their leg oars are quite long. I don't know what the significance of the hammer and sickle were there, but there are different groups who have rowing teams who do have the honor of towing this great huge barge. It's quite a big celebration, so I wanted to make sure that I got there early so I could get in some kind of vantage point to take some photos. And here comes the entourage up the canal from the lake. Yangshui used to be right on the lake, but through centuries of silting and plant growth, it's now about 2.5 miles from open water. You can see the big barge with a pagoda-like structure in the middle of it being towed by these several boats of leg rowers. And when Khrushchev and Bulganin came to Inle Lake, they came to Tangi to stay overnight and were taken down to Inle Lake the next day to see the leg rowers racing. They were carried on this barge too, so it's brought out on special occasions.
You recall what time of the year this festival was?
Yes, this was at the end of the rainy season. It was in October, and I'm quite confident it was early October, but on another year it might be a little later in the year. But this is the procession, or at least part of it, where they have taken these little images, none of them any bigger than a foot high, and as I say, there are 5 of them, and they don't even look like anything now. They're just blobs of gold leaf because they've been used for so many centuries. People putting gold leaf on them. They don't look like statues of the Buddha anymore, but that's what they were originally, I'm told. But then they're loaded onto an ark and carried from that big barge to the big pagoda in Yangshui, and they're placed there for a couple of weeks.
You had noted previously the significance of the white umbrellas and their symbolism.
Yes, it's wherever you see that you know it's either royalty or something sacred in that part of Burma. Since the villages on Inle Lake are all on stilts, all but Yangshui, they have their bazaar day in boats, and so this is a floating bazaar, so to speak, with sugarcane, sandalwood. I see peppers there, and some kind of green leafy stuff, onions, bananas. It's a floating bazaar, and it happens every 5th day in each of the villages, and a different village, a different day for each village, by the way, so they don't all have their bazaar days at the same time. Inle Lake's an interesting place. If Burma were open to tourists, this would be the place where the tourists would certainly come. As I say, it's about 20, 25 miles by road from Tangi, and an equal number of miles from Heiho Airport, which is the only airport in that part of Burma. This chap is carrying mud. He's cut it from the shore, and he's going to take it out to his house and build a garden. So, as I say, the water's quite shallow. This net has gone clear down to the bottom, and they'll lift that and catch a few fish, hopefully, at each net set. Here's some more views of some Panjis, some Buddhist monks being towed in a barge by a group of leg rowers. They have a kind of a coxswain who counts cadence for them to make sure they're all together, and they do quite a good job. He beats a drum. Here's some young boys in monks' uniforms. It's all a part of that big festival at the end of Buddhist Lent, the beginning of the dry season.
You know how they stabilize these crafts? Is there a keel on those? Because they don't look that wide.
They're not wide, and there is no keel, and it's just practice, like a bicycle, I guess. The canoes, or rather the boats that I was in and on, were no wider than a say a 14 or 16 foot canoe. These girls are in classic Burmese dress and doing a classic Burmese dance, and they're doing it for the premier and president of the Soviet Union, who came while I was there, and they towed them around Inle Lake in that big barge that you saw in the shape of a bird. And this is out in the middle of the lake at the rest house there, and everything is either floating or on pilings. It was quite a big day, and there was a huge press. By huge, I mean at least 30 or 40 or more photographers and correspondents there, following Khrushchev and Bulganin around. And here they are arriving on their big barge, being towed once again by those same big boats. One of the things they did to entertain them was to race. Two teams got in tandem and raced down a laid-out course in front of their barge, and they really flew through the water. As I recall, there were about 6 or 8 teams, and 2 of them were women, and there you see them there. Some of them in blue longies, skirts, and the other in pink. And you can see the coxswain in the middle of the boat sitting down there. These are chintis, or lion dogs, that guard the entrance to pagodas. And you see them all over Burma, and this is where I photographed those. This is Mandalay. These scenes are taken from the top of Mandalay Hill, the location of some bitter and long fighting in World War II between the Japanese and the British. But the Japanese were successful in taking most of Burma, and then a couple of years later the British and the American and Chinese came back in. This is a standing Buddha, as you can see. It's unusual. Most of the Buddha statues are in a sitting position, but this one is standing. It's very impressive, and it's at the top of Mandalay Hill. The women in Burma wear, for the most part, a sheer blouse called an angi and a wraparound skirt in the form of a tube of cloth that is called a longi, L-O-N-G-Y-I. These scenes are taken of the Irrawaddy floodplain upon which Mandalay is built. From the hill, you can see the Irrawaddy in the background. From Kipling's song, The Road to Mandalay, obviously the road was the Irrawaddy River, and those are rice paddies on the floodplain in various stages of growth. We took this trip to Mandalay and up to Lashio and further up to the Chinese border at Nam Kam during the semester break in January, between the first semester, which ended the 4th of December, and the second semester, which started about the 19th of January. This is in Sagaing. I'm told this was a very ancient pagoda or stupa, much older than that one you saw in Rangoon called the Suli Pagoda. Nobody ever tears a pagoda down in Burma. If it's built, it just, the people who build it just, they die and it goes into disuse, but they don't ever tear it down. These are Shan people up on the Chinese border. There are just as many Shan people living in Yunnan province of China, I was told, as there are in northeastern Burma. And just a river separates the two countries. And I went up there, Mrs. Shantz and I, to stay with Gordon Seagrave, to meet him and talk with him, the Burma surgeon. He founded a hospital in North Burma and established a nursing school. Seagrave has written a lot about his work in Burma. He's dead now, but he was born there, the son of Baptist missionaries who themselves were born in Burma. But he was educated in the United States, went to Johns Hopkins Medical School, and died in Burma as he told us he was going to do. This fellow is tattooed over his torso and arms, and he's doing a Shan dance. Their music accompaniment is cymbals, gongs, bamboo clappers, and drums. Occasionally there might be a wind instrument, a horn of some sort.
The name of this village again was
Nam Kham. Namkham, and it's right on the Burmese-Chinese border. Just a little bit west, say 4 or 5 miles west of where the Burma Road crossed into China from Lashio to Kunming. Lashio is the capital of the northern Shan states. Tongji is the capital of the southern Shan states. This is a fellow tattooed all over his body, as you can see, except his head and his hands and his feet.
Are those whistles that are being held in the mouth, or is that...
No, those are cheroots. They're smoking a cigar.
Okay.
As Kipling called it, a whack and white cheroot. Cheroots are, I tried one. I smoked at the time I was in Burma almost 40 years ago, and I tried one, and they don't taste like tobacco at all. I tried betel nut once, too, and I didn't like it either. But if you look at these, the faces of these people, they look very Chinese, and they are.
You had mentioned before that you collected a smaller version of one of these drums, and coming up we're going to see someone tuning one of these.
Yes, I was able to watch them. He's pulling straps to tighten the head, just as you would on a snare drum in this country, and then they place beeswax on the drum head to give it a different tonal quality. These buildings are made of river stone that the natives gathered together, and it's the hospital that Gordon Seagrave had built. He had this hospital built before World War II, and much of it was destroyed and in the fighting in that area, and so it was rebuilt. And we stayed with him 2 or 3 days in a room for guests in the hospital. And these are some of the patients who are there. He operates all morning, just about every day, for goiter primarily. There's a lot of goiter in that part of the world. And I don't know what tribe these people are, but they come from both sides of the border, from China and from the Shan states. And he established and still ran while we were there a large school of nursing. Shan girls seemed to take to nursing very well. And he had a couple of European doctors with him and one Indian. That lady that you just saw there had bound feet, and I wanted to get a close-up picture of her. There's the sign for the hospital, both in Burmese and in English. There's Dr. Seagrave. He was, I would say, in his early 70s at that time. And quite an interesting fellow. That's the border marker between China and Burma. That's a river valley, and the river in flood, Mrs. Shantz is looking there at the marker. the river in flood will change its course, so the marker stays where it is, even though the river at times is on one side or the other of it. This is back in Tongji. It's Independence Day, and that's the Gurkha band performing. This is a ceremony of Hindu origin, I think, where they lop the heads off of animals, and a good many of the soldiers in the army there in Burma, in Tongji rather, were Indians of the Hindu variety, and they had this festival, and people thought I ought to come and see it and take some pictures of it, so I did. And there he whacked the head off a goat.
These animals, after they're sacrificed like this, is the meat then distributed to people at the festival?
Yes, it's immediately cooked and eaten during that time, and what's left over is distributed. Sort of the highlight of the ceremony was the sacrifice, killing of a water buffalo calf. And there you see him being readied for his slaughter. And the chap that is to do it, I was told, was sent off to meditate for several days, and he fasted and prayed and prepared himself for this particular event. And when he was successful in carrying it out, the colonel, the commandant of the military police, put some sort of honorary cap on him. And
September 26.
This chap is dressed up in a costume to imitate or signify a peacock. Peacocks, peafowl, are common in that part of Burma. These people are black Karens dancing in preparation for going down to the main part of town. They're at Government High School, really, just kind of practicing and performing for a group of school children. The dance, I'm told, had something to do with courtship. The black Karens are one of the many tribes of Karens that live in that part of Burma. And these guys are dressed up as a deer, and they're doing some kind of animated dance for the school children. This one is dressed as in the form of a classical butterfly, and they're dancing to the accompaniment of music provided by a band, you might say, or an ensemble composed of drummers, cymballers, and this fellow is going to do a sword dance. As you can see, he's quite young. He's probably still in his teens, but very skilled at what he's doing. And what they are doing really is just performing for these school children in preparation for going down to do the same thing officially for the government visitors who come to Tongji. And during the course of my stay there, Sir Hubert and Lady Rance came. Sir Hubert, was the last British Governor General of Burma before independence in 1948. And they had a kind of a lawn fete for him, what might be described as an outdoor tea party in the afternoon. And for entertainment, they brought these costumed dancers in to perform for Sir Hubert and Lady Rance. And later on in the same month, another visitor from China came, Madame Sung. She was an official representative of the Chinese People's Republic, and they set up an afternoon outdoor tea party for her. It's the dry season, so no problem with the weather. It's quite warm, but not hot. Tangi has the ideal location of never getting too hot and having cool, pleasant nights. In January and February, it might even frost at night occasionally. Here are the black Karens again performing. The man in the center has a flute made of bamboo with a gourd at the base, and he's dancing around playing that flute. That's the only music that they have to accompany their dance. I think I mentioned once before that I was told that the dance had something to do with courtship. These boys were members of the student body at Kambaza College, and they apparently had learned this stick dance, as it was called, and this chap in the center is dancing a classic Shan dance to the accompaniment of some complicated music. But he's dressed up in Shan fashion. He has his lanji pulled up around him, more up under his crotch. Normally that skirt would be floor length. And here's the band that accompanied some of the dancers. You can see the black Karen sitting in the background there. And the men in their deer costume performing to the accompaniment of a percussion band. As you can see, some of the drums are quite large.
The drum there has the same general form as the drums that we saw among the Kachin, was it, up in the village you visited?
No, Shan.
Or Shan, I'm sorry. Okay.
And those are Shan people here.
Okay.
Now, those drums are ceremonial drums that they only bring out for a procession of one sort or another, and they are beating as Sir Hubert and Lady Rance and the Home Minister and the Mayor of Tangi walk out to greet the people who have come to take part in their tea party. Now we're back on the grounds of Government High School where these fellows were performing in preparation for going down to the afternoon tea party. And this is Madame Song, the Chinese the Chinese communist sister of Madame Chiang Kai-shek, who came to give greetings from the Chinese People's Republic to the people of Burma, and she was brought up to Tangi because of its location and delightful climate. As you can see, it's a sunny day, but cool enough so that Madame Song feels the need to have a light outer garment on. She's standing there at the table between the mayor of Tangi and the Home Secretary, who is a Shan Sabwa, but also the representative of the Burmese government in Tangi. And this is the chap doing the dance, dressed as in the fashion of a classic peafowl. And with him the little butterfly. And these two guys are performing sword dance. Those swords are called dahs, D-A-H. A dah is a sword in Burmese, and they're very sharp. And I would imagine that if they made a mistake, they could draw blood pretty easily. Shan men quite often wear those baggy trousers instead of a skirt. And here the boys from Kambaza College doing that stick dance again. They must have practiced that a lot because they were pretty good at it. I don't know what significance it has. I'm sure it has one, but I was never told and never asked, I guess. But you can see the party is a kind of a relaxed affair where everybody just sits around, drinks tea, and eats fruit and cookies and cakes, and it's a tea party in the British style. There's a lot more to partake of than just tea. These open park-like grounds are right in front of the government building in Tongji, sometimes used as a parade ground, and those are pine trees, so you get some idea of how subtropical Tongji is. Here Madame Sung is reading the greetings of the Chinese People's Republic. She read it in English, so I know what she said. She said that she was toasting the long friendship that they were expecting between China and Burma, now that Burma had its independence. Here we're back on Inle Lake on the day the Russians came, and I must have had some black and white film to take pictures of, and you can see the top of the head of Khrushchev and Bulganin. The taller one is Bulganin, and the bald guy is Khrushchev. They did not invite Mrs. Shantz and I or the other American couple to their any of their the festivities that would have brought us in close contact with those Russian leaders. My guess is they didn't want the Russian leaders to know that Americans were making the kind of impact we were in northern Burma. These boys are playing Chinlon. It's a hollow cane ball, and there's no scoring or winning. They just do it, try to keep that ball up in the air using their feet, trying never to touch it in the course of the game. And as you can see, they get to be quite skilled. I've seen African boys do this with a little leather ball. Chinlon, Chinlon.
Is there a kind of a rule about keeping it within the concentric circles there, or is that what does that signify?
I'm not sure, but I would guess that there is some out of bounds there. So yes, after the rainy season's over, it's harvest time for the rice paddies, and that's what these folks are doing. They're threshing rice over some bamboo poles, beating the rice stalks.
The location here is?
This is, I believe, Kengtung. Kengtung is located in what we think of today as the Golden Triangle, where Burma, Laos, and Thailand all come together in northeastern Burma. It's the easternmost extension of the country of Burma into old Indochina. And these are school children. Because Mrs. Shantz and I were school teachers, and they knew it in Burma, every place we went, they always took us to visit the schools, which we enjoyed. And in this particular part of Burma, it's customary for them to start the school day with a series of calisthenics. And so I took some pictures of that. This is early morning, shortly after dawn. As you can see from the shadows, it's the sun is still pretty low, they do this first thing in the morning before they have their classes, and that's their school building in the background with a thatched roof and a woven bamboo sides. And once again, this is in the area, the general area of Keng Tung. We were the guests of the PEO's sister, Sao San Fong. The location of this, by the way, is on the bank of the Salween River, just about 40 miles, 50 miles perhaps east of Tanji. I went there with the commandant of the military police, to collect some fish for the Smithsonian out of that particular river. And these boys playing Chinlon here and not doing such a good job of it are members of the military band. They're Gurkhas. And the man in the white T-shirt and the black facing us, the black trunks, is the pipe master of the pipe major of the bagpipe band. And they provide the music, the military music, martial music for the military police in that part of Burma. And when I say military police, I mean the army. They're called military police in Burma, but they are actually soldiers. And they do act as police in that part of the country. They're the only police. That's the Salween River, and there is one bridge over the Salween River in that part of Burma, and you're going to see it in a minute here, and that's why the soldiers were there, to guard it, because this country is, well, that's the old bridge left over from World War II that was destroyed then, but the new bridge is several hundred yards upstream. There it is. And the soldiers are there to guard that bridge, to keep it out of the hands of the insurgents and the KMTs and any rebel groups that might be present there. I was fortunate to get around Burma by being a friend of the colonel, the commandant of the military police. I met him in the golf club. Here we're back in Keng Tung, and those people are Lisus coming to town. Or I'm sorry, they are not Lisus, they're Ekau, E-K-A-U, or E-K-A-W, it's sometimes spelled. And once again, this is in the Golden Triangle. And there's some kind of Buddhist festival going on. And I don't remember the particulars, but during this festival they have what they call a pwe, a P-W-E. A pwe is kind of like a carnival, and it's accompanied by a processional where they're carrying these pagoda-like structures that contain gifts. Those are Lisus in the background there, the ones with the dark headdresses. That particular tribe is located in the Golden Triangle, and they're famous as being great opium growers. And here again you see the white umbrellas because the Sabwa is coming by, the big hereditary chieftain of that part of Burma with his own personal army, who are, by the way, Gurkhas. And the ladies in the center there are Ekau. They have very elaborate silver dresses, headdresses, and silver bangled bibs that they wear on their upper body. These structures were built as launch sites for rockets, just ceremonial rockets. I don't mean rockets that would go into space or anything like that. They're sky rockets, we used to call them when I was a kid. There you can see them up close. They're homemade jobs with bamboo and gunpowder. And they have at this pwe they have a big bazaar where they sell a lot of food, and they do a lot of gambling in booths. And this is the big pwe at Keng Tung. It's here's a group of Ikas coming into town, women and young girls, and when the last one in this group spies me, she ducks out. They apparently don't mind their picture being taken if you're not too close to them. But I'm told that some of the Karen tribes in Burma really resent getting their picture taken because in their mythology, if you have somebody's picture, you have their image, and you can do things with that image, like cast a spell on them. These chaps are dressed in Shan costumes, ceremonial costumes of some sort in connection with this big religious ceremony or pwe, and they were practicing, and I just paused and took a picture of them. Here are some Shans gambling at this pwe. They have they use a dice-like thing, but instead of numbers, there are the picture of different kinds of animals: a tiger, a fish, a snake, an elephant, and there is Mrs. Shantz gambling, trying her luck with something like Chuck-a-Luck. There are 3 dice in there, in that little box that he shakes them up, and she's betting her little coins on the fish there. But gambling's quite popular in that part of Burma. And this is a Padang woman, a giraffe-necked woman, and the location of this is Loi Kaw, Loikaw. It's in a state called Karenni, Karenni, and she has a little baby in that basket. I didn't realize it until we were about to leave. I heard the baby cry, and I looked in there. She, Mrs. Shantz, is just a little over 5 feet tall, about 5'1½", and this woman with her giraffe neck is not as tall as my wife. This is back in Rangoon. I guess it was one of the last scenes I took in Burma. It is at a big Shinbyu, Shinbyu. Shinbyu is a celebration or ceremony to accompany a Buddhist boy's entrance into a monastery. And most Burmese Buddhist boys enter a monastery at some time during their life, generally in their pre-teens, and they attend school for a while there, and most of them leave the monastery after a period of time, but some of them stay forever, all their life. And to save money, a lot of families will go together and have a big Shinbyu. But the rich families would have a big Shinbyu just for their one son. This was a big multi-family Shinbyu, big celebration where the aunts and the uncles and the grandparents come. And I guess we're jumping around. This is back in Taungji on Independence Day, July 4th. I'm sorry, January 4th. I got mixed up with ours. This is the Gurkha band, the pipe band. They know all kinds of Scottish airs, and they were entertaining the people on the day when Burma celebrated its independence. Burma got independence from England in January 4th, 1948. Not unlike a United States 4th of July celebration.